Episode number 904, Why BNI Has a Code of Ethics.
You're listening to the official BNI podcast with BNI founder and Chief Visionary Officer, Dr. Ivan Misner. Stay tuned for networking and referral marketing tips from the man who's been called the father of modern networking, along with suggestions and insights into getting the most from your membership in the world's largest networking organization, BNI.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the official BNI podcast. I'm Priscilla Rice, and I'm coming to you from Live Oak Recording Studio in Berkeley, California, and I'm joined on the phone today by the founder and the Chief Visionary Officer of BNI, Dr. Ivan Misner. Hello, Ivan. How are you, and where are you?
I am happy to say I am at the U.S. and Canadian National Conference for BNI in Houston, Texas. And I love BNI conferences, and having the two countries get together to do their national conference is always exciting.
Oh, nice. That sounds like fun.
It is fun. Conferences and conventions are a blast. It always amazes me to see how this organization has grown over the years.
It really has.
Yep. So today I'm going to be talking about BNI's Code of Ethics and why we have a Code of Ethics. For those of you listening, you can go back to episode number 285, where I did talk about BNI's Code of Ethics there. But I'm going to give some information that I didn't share in that podcast back in 2012. That's when I did that podcast. And I'm going to give some information that I didn't share there. And the reason I'm doing this, it was actually recommended by my assistant, Dana Coyle, who was on a webinar that I did, and somebody asked me a question. And they said, why do we have the last item of the Code of Ethics? I will live up to the ethical standards of my profession. Why do we have that? And he said, I'm a car salesman. We don't have an industry-wide Code of Ethics. So why do you have that? And so I want to answer that question specifically, which I didn't do in 285. But before I do, I want to give a little bit of context, first starting with all of the 6 items in the Code of Ethics. Number 1 is I will provide the quality of service at the prices that I have quoted. 2 is I will be truthful with the members and their referrals. 3, I will build goodwill and trust among members and their referrals. 4, I will take responsibility for following up on the referrals I receive. 5, I will display a positive and supportive attitude. And of course, 6, I will live up to the ethical standards of my profession. The first 5 were created back in 1986 with the Board of Advisors. And that was back when it was literally just the Board of Advisors, not the International Board of Advisors. We only had chapters pretty much in Southern California. And we had talked about the fact that we needed some kind of code of ethics. And so I sat down with the board, and literally around the dining room table of my home in Laverne, where I lived at the time and where I started BNI. We sat around the dining room table and we started talking about what the code of ethics should be, because we needed something to hold people accountable for their performance as a business professional in BNI. And Priscilla, we were like into page 2 of all of the specifics of how people should behave in a BNI chapter. And one of the members is like, this is too much. Yeah. Nobody's going to ever read this. It's just too much content. It's starting to feel like, a tax code, U.S. tax code, instead of a code of ethics. And we pretty much just, imagine a chessboard. We just kind of, swiped the whole board across and wiped everything out and started over. And our idea was to just come up with a handful of general considerations to follow an ethical code. And that's where we came up with the first 5. Good quality service, be truthful, goodwill. That was an important one. And so many members over the years have actually been asked to step down because they just didn't build goodwill in the chapter or and trust, of course. Following up on referrals. Oh my goodness. How could you get a referral and not follow up? But even in 86, we'd seen that happen. And we're like, no, you can't do that. You got to follow up. And display a positive and supportive attitude. That was really important. So, I mean, isn't it amazing? It's been almost 40 years since the Code of Ethics was done. Yet those still apply just
Yeah.
as strongly today as they did in the 70 plus countries that we're in. They
Yeah.
still apply. Number 6 was added later. I don't recall what year, but it would have been in probably the late 90s or early 2000s. And it came about because of certain professions, like medical professions, that had, they have a code where they can't share their clients. They can't say anything about who their clients are. But in particular, it was the bar associations in Northern California, the legal associations, who started to tell their attorney members that they could not be a member of BNI because, that there was nothing in there about not sharing their client database, and confidentiality, wasn't in our code of ethics. And so not all professions have that requirement. And so we literally negotiated with various bar associations to come up with number 6, which is I will live up to the ethical standards of my profession. And then in most of the manuals that members see, there's a note at the end that says professional standards outlined in a formal code of conduct for any profession supersede the above standards. And we put that in also at the request of a number of bar associations to say, hey, look, if you're an attorney, your code of ethics supersedes ours, because generally speaking, professional codes tend to be more particular than BNI's code of ethics. And so number 6 and that note at the end came about years later because of various medical professions and legal professions. And the code of ethics has been one of the things that we're, I think, really proud of. And it's also a great tool to use to have conversations with members when, they may be bringing in referrals, but are they building goodwill? Do they have a positive attitude? So I've seen chapters where they sat down and it's like, you're a good member, but I remember, and I think I've said this in a previous podcast, Priscilla, we had one member, a woman who said to me, we got this guy in our chapter where it's like the best thing he can ever do is call in sick. Because when he's not there, we have a great meeting. And she said, he is a fun sucker. He just sucks the fun right out of a room. And so, that's when I told him, look, you need to sit down with him and have a conversation about his attitude. And he needs to, come in with a positive attitude. So the Code of Ethics was really thought through thoroughly and was multiple meetings of the Board of Advisors, many, many hours spent, and probably just as many hours combined for item number 6 in the Code of Ethics. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Let me ask you, I think the number 6 applies a lot to like therapists.
Yeah.
Like that's what I always thought it was for, we've had some therapists in our chapter, and they don't get a lot of referrals. And I think that was mainly because it's very private. There's not a lot you can say about it,
Well, I mean, I do see therapists that get referrals, but you just can't give the name of the person that you're referring.
Right.
But there are a number of other ways that therapists can get referrals. And I think I've done a podcast on it. I'll have to look. Referrals for the difficult to refer business. And I know I did an article on this years ago, and I bet I've done a podcast on it. I'm doing a search as we talk right now. Yeah, it's episode number 481. Episode 481, Referrals for the Difficult to Refer Business. And I wrote this article and did this podcast because of therapists and because of the business that I was in when I started BNI, which was business consultant. And it was hard for people, it's way before coaches. business coaches. I mean,
Uh-huh.
1985, way before business coaches. And so people didn't know how to refer me. I was a difficult to refer business, and therapists were even more difficult to
Yeah.
refer, in my opinion. And so go listen to episode 481. And one of the things that I talk about is doing speaking engagements as a way of getting referrals. And you count that as a legitimate referral if you get a speaking engagement to a local Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, women's organization, any organization. Listen to episode 481. And that's a great way for therapists to get referrals. That kind of sidetracks the topic, but it's an important question, and I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah. But the rest of the ethics, I think one of the things I really enjoy about the code of ethics is it used to be when we were always in person. Now I don't know whether this still happens or not for different chapters, but we would all stand up and we would say that we would repeat the code of ethics in unison. And it really brought together the chapter and made the new member feel connected. I thought it was
Yeah.
really a cool thing.
Yeah, a lot of chapters still do that. And it's something that's part of the system with any new member. Stand there and have the new member read the code of ethics, and you have the members read the code of ethics with it. It was something that I saw done many, many years ago and incorporated into the program as a result of watching how impressive it was to have everyone stand there and do the code of ethics together. It actually, I think, started in Las Vegas of all places, where
That-
the director there would have some fun with it. She's still a BNI director, Leslie Taylor, and Leslie would say, "Okay, raise your right hand, lift your left foot, and put your left hand on the BNI business card holder." And raise your right
Yeah.
hand, and she'd have some fun with it. And but they would all read the code of ethics together. And
Yeah.
it started with that, and then we kind of implemented it worldwide.
Yeah, I think it's nice.
Well, that's the history behind the Code of Ethics. A little more information than I did in the previous podcast. I hope that gives people some context. And be proud. Be proud to be part of an organization that has a Code of Ethics that we really want our members to follow.
Mhm.
Thanks, Priscilla.
Okay, great, Ivan. Thank you so much. That's it for this week. This podcast is sponsored by MisnerAudioprograms.com. And these audio programs will provide you with the tools and the inspiration to powerfully enhance your BNI experience. So check out the great material that's available to you at MisnerAudioprograms.com. And then use the promo code IVAN50 for 50% off of everything. All of the proceeds go to the BNI Foundation. Thank you so much for listening. This is Priscilla Rice, and we look forward to having you join us again next week for another exciting episode of the official BNI podcast.